Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to IAedChat Live. We are continuing to bring you the latest educational news each month, and we're pleased to be able to connect with you again this evening. We have a special guest joining us. Kayla Delzer is here, and she's going to be chatting with us in just a few minutes. As you can see, tonight's chat will have a live video stream, and we'll be taking questions from you, our audience members. So if you have a question for Kayla, please submit that via our hashtag on Twitter, which is hashtag IAedChat, and we'll monitor that feed. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. We will be getting this show on our podcast a little bit later tonight or later this week. If you have not checked out our podcast, we have several episodes on Apple Podcasts, Podomatic, Spotify, and the Google Play Market. And subscribe, give us a rating, tell us what you think about this, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about our shows. Okay, so let's introduce ourselves here, and I will start. My name is Dan Butler. I am the principal of Epworth Elementary School in the Western Dubuque School District, and I'm very pleased to be able to connect with everybody tonight. Let me turn things over to Andrea.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrea Townsley. I am a former fourth grade teacher and instructional coach turned school improvement consultant with Grantwood AEA in and around Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Nick.
Well, good evening. I'm Nick Duffy, principal of Jackson Elementary in the Cedar Rapids Community School District. Enjoying what was a very sunny end of March day, although the temperatures weren't quite feeling it. So more important than that, though, we've got Kayla Delzer with us tonight. And Kayla is the 2019 North Dakota Teacher of the Year, as well as a two-time 2017 and 2018 Global 100 honoree, recognizing her as one of the top 100 innovative educators in the world. The New York Times named her one of the tech-savviest teachers in the United States. She has 11 years of teaching experience in second and third grade. Governor Doug Burgum has recognized Kayla for her contributions to education in North Dakota and assigned her a chair on North Dakota's Innovative Education Task Force. She has been recognized as both an ISTE influencer and a HarperCollins Publishing influencer. Additionally, in March 2018, she was named one of just 30 all-star digital innovators in the United States by PBS. She has also delivered hundreds of keynotes, one of note being at Twitter headquarters. Her work with classroom redesign and flexible seating has become the standard worldwide. She is currently writing a book about classroom learning spaces and flexible seating titled Flex Ed, Flexible Seating for Flexible Learners, set to release in 2019. She is also a co-author of the best-selling book Education Right Now, published in December 2017. Welcome to you, Kayla. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm so excited to be joining you guys tonight.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you as well. So to start things off tonight, Kayla, can you please tell us about yourself and your experiences in education?
Sure. So I always joke that I knew I was going to be a teacher since the first day of kindergarten. And I say that like fully convinced that that is true of my life. I grew up in a really small town in North Dakota. And my mom was actually my kindergarten teacher. And so I saw the joy that my mom had in her job. And I knew like I wanted a job like that, where I liked going to work every day and every day was fun and different. And so I thought I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And so I went all the way through my schooling and I went to the University of North Dakota for my degree. And I actually ended up getting 2 degrees, one specifically in early childhood, because I thought I was going to teach kindergarten. And I did my student teaching in a second grade classroom. And I knew that I wasn't going to be teaching kindergarten after one day in second grade. And so I got my first job in Thief River Falls, Minnesota, and I taught second grade there for 6 years. And then I moved back to North Dakota, and I've taught second grade and now third grade. So this is my 11th year of teaching. And I went back and got my master's degree back in 2014 in elementary education as well. So I guess teaching has kind of in my family bloodline. My dad was my music teacher. My mom was my kindergarten teacher. They both taught more than 40 years, which is outstanding, amazing goals that for me. And so that's a little bit about my background and my history, I guess, with education.
That's fantastic. Thanks for getting us started with that, Kayla. So how about talking to us and our viewers about your passions in education, excuse me, and tell us about the things that drive you to do what you do.
Okay, so my overarching mantra is, if it's right for kids, it's right. And so that's typically how I make every decision regarding kids in my classroom or professional development that I give, is really just trying to focus on what's best for kids. And I think especially in this year, as being North Dakota Teacher of the Year, I'm really finding that it's imperative that I keep that lens of not necessarily what policy is telling me is best for kids, or what the news is telling me is what's best for kids, but really keeping that focus on what is best for those kids that I know and see in my classroom every day. And just being a voice for those kids. I think I'm more than ever passionate about sharing as a voice for teachers and a voice for students, not only in North Dakota, but across the United States. And so just making decisions that are based best on what is really best for kids, even if that might be uncomfortable for adults or teachers or school districts right away. And like I say, I guess a couple of my other passions are, like you mentioned, flexible seating. So classroom design is definitely a passion of mine that's kind of stirred up maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But really the foundation, I believe, of successful classrooms is relationships between those teachers that you have in your building and the students that they serve. But also, I think relationships between colleagues, relationships between staff and the administration, and then also just the parents that you serve. And so I speak a lot about relationships, technology, flexible seating. Those are sort of the 3 things that I definitely am super passionate about. In addition to kind of going with flexible seating is just based around student choice, but sort of just letting kids kind of drive their learning and their space as well. So not just flexible seating, but also flexible learning. So doing things like Genius Hour, where kids get to really drive what they're excited about, what they're passionate about, or doing lots of different STEM or STEAM or PBL challenges in my classroom where kids get to really drive the learning has been really fun for me and for the kids as well. So I guess to just kind of wrap all of that up, I think it's just maybe this shift that's happening in education, about maybe just, putting those students first and letting them choose. And then also just advocating, I think, has really been a new passion that I found that I do like doing. So that's been really fun too.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. Your passion is contagious. Your kids are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
You have invested so much time, effort, and energy into flexible seating and classroom environment. Talk to us more about this passion and why it matters so much to you.
Oh my gosh. So I think it's like 6 years now that I've been working on just classroom redesign and thinking about how we're designing schools and how we're designing classrooms. And a lot of the work that I've been doing just really involves giving choices to kids regarding where they sit and how they learn. And so I think 2 things with flexible seating that I get a lot of questions with. One is, I don't know if I can do flexible seating because my kids need structure, and all kids need structure. And flexible seating does not mean a lack of structure. I feel like I want that on like bumper cars, stickers, and like shirts that people can wear, because I think that is like a cliche or a taboo, I guess, that might go against flexible seating. But I think since I switched to flexible seating 5 or 6-ish years ago now, I've seen just such amazing results when kids are choosing where they're learning best. And I'm not just telling them that you learn best, in desks facing rows like we started doing when the Industrial Revolution kicked off. And so I have better classroom management now than I ever have, because I need to make sure that the kids are sitting based on where they learn best, where they can be most productive. And I need to know where kids are at all of the time. And so it keeps me on my feet, which is good. There's no just sitting around, and that's for sure. So I think first and foremost that, but I also just think The kids deserve to have some choice in where they learn best. And I think for so long, we've just, like I said, told kids you learn best sitting in this way with your desk facing this way, and I'm going to read and you're going to listen. And so I think when I get emails from teachers in December that are saying, I need some help with this, something's not working, my number one mindset is always like, did you ask your kids if you could change one thing in your classroom, would it be? And so my kids are constantly swapping out things in our classrooms and rearranging. And I shouldn't really say constantly, but I would say like at least twice a month, they're like, can we try this table over here? Or can we move this couch over here and see how that feels? And 97% of the time, it's better than whatever I could have designed up. And so just letting them really take control of that has been really, really good this year for my kids. And the benefits from flexible seating, I mean, when I first started doing this, I approached my principal. I had been moved from one school in our district to a different school in our district, and I approached our principal and I said, I want to try this thing in our classroom where I just let kids choose seats where they want to sit, and I have lots of different options like they have at Starbucks. I want a table where kids can move if that's what they need, a table where kids can stand if that's what they need. I can let kids lay down on the floor and work if they want. I'm going to have a coffee table for kids. I'm bringing in some other comfortable chairs. And I was like, what do you think of all of this? And he goes at the time, he's like, well, what kind of research do you have for this? And I was like, well, I've seen it work at Starbucks. So if it works at Starbucks, maybe it will work with us at school. And he was like, okay, I'm going to let you try this, only because in his office, he had a standing desk. And so I knew like if he has a standing desk, it might be what's best for kids too. And I guess like from there, some local news picked it up and we ended up being on the front page of the Fargo Forum in North Dakota, which is like being on the front page of North Dakota. And so since then, I mean, there was just several opportunities to write and speak about it. And if you go on my blog, topdogteaching.com, there are just multiple interviews, podcasts, articles that I've written or been interviewed for that are just full of tips, ideas, management, what to do, maybe what not to do. But I think the number one advice I have for you is that flexible seating is not about the stuff. Like there's not a certain like grocery list that you need to go and like check off that you have these things. And it varies year by year. What this class needs is far different than what my class last year needed. And so just ask your kids and just understand there's not like this ticker list of things that you need to check off to make sure that you're doing flexible seating, right? It's actually more of a mindset shift that you are handing over that power or that control and allowing kids to sort of sit where they need to sit. And that's a lot of responsibility and that's a lot of ownership that happens with those kids. And I think when you do that, the more power that you give up to those kids, the more power that you get back. And so it's just really streamlined process once you sort of get it off the ground and kids are understanding where they learn best. So I'm also happy to answer any more questions that you have about flexible seating. Just shoot me a message on Twitter, reach out to me on Instagram, or send me an email. And like you mentioned, Flex Ed is coming out this year. I'm working with Dave Burgess on making that book super practical for teachers. I don't want to give away too much, but it's going to be a sort of a different format than what he has published in the past. And it's going to be featuring lots of classrooms from around the world with a whole span from pre-K to college that are implementing flexible seating and how they're sort of doing it. So we're really, really excited about it. And it is going to come out this year. So look for that.
So I'm going to follow up a little bit. I know I beat you to the punch there. So anyway, something that you mentioned that resonated with me, and I think it's important for the viewers to hear this because I think it's just a good point as far as it's not about the stuff. The flexible seating is not about the stuff. It's more about that mindset shift that you had spoken of. And talk to me about and our viewers about when you arrived at that, like, you know what, I want to do something different. I want to replicate Starbucks type of environment or whatever. So how did you arrive at that? Like maybe a change was needed.
You're going to laugh actually, because you can't make this stuff up. So it was 2014, I think, or 2015. And I had kind of like been in my classroom. I was allowing kids to like sit or stand or lay down on the floor and work, I guess, for years. But I kind of came to this different model when I was getting ready to give my TED Talk. The first TED Talk I did, so I won actually the pitch in March, and my actual TED Talk was July 23rd. So I didn't have like a year to build up this TED Talk. Like I had like 4 months. And so when you get picked to do a TED Talk, or when you sign up, or however the process happens for you, you get a speaking coach. You have someone who helps you with your script. You have somebody who helps you with your slide deck. Actually, they created the slide deck with my ideas. And so there were several different people that I was meeting with in the time span between when I was selected and when I was to give the talk. And so they all had these hard deadlines for me, right? And so I was at my house at the time, and I was finding that I was doing everything but my work for TED. Like I would go for runs, like extensive, like 14-mile runs to avoid working on my talk, or doing laundry, or just my house was not a good workplace for me. I didn't have an office. I didn't have any place to really sit and work. And so when push came to shove and I knew that I needed to get my work done for that deadline, every single time I would go to Starbucks and I would just say, I'm going here at 8 and I'm staying until I'm done. And it worked every single time. And I was thinking, like, what is it about this place that I can get my work done here and I can't get it done at home? And maybe it's part of that's like a little bit of self-discipline, and also making myself just, you are going to stay here until you're done. Because giving a TED Talk is something that I really wanted to do, but it was also at the time one of the scariest things that I could ever imagine. And so eventually, like, I got done doing my TED Talk, but I kept going back to Starbucks because I was just intrigued by, it's a place where you get coffee, but it's also a place where tons of people go to get work done. And so I started really looking, it's strange, I get this. Like, I started really looking at how long people were there and taking data on, like, if they were there for over an hour, did they switch seats? Did they stay in the same seat? And I would start to see the same kind of people, literally the same people, like week after week. They would go there at the same time. And so I was paying attention to the weather, what kind of music was playing, what kind of things they have hanging on the wall, if they switched out any options. And that's the summer I went to my principal and said, like, I just feel like I want to try this because it's working really well with adults. And I think maybe this could also work with kids. And so, of course, once you try something new, like, you see inspiration everywhere, right? Or you see it lots of places. And so it's kind of like if you buy a new car, right? Like I bought a gray Pathfinder last year, and I swear I never saw a gray Pathfinder in Fargo. And now that I have one, I see them everywhere, right? And I feel like that's how it is. Like, when you switch something over, you get inspired by it, and then you see inspiration is everywhere. So there's a frozen yogurt shop in Bend, Oregon, where they don't have any tables and chairs. They just have this bar that goes down the middle, and people just lean on there and talk, and that's where they eat their frozen yogurt, because the owners are thinking, like, the time that you're going to spend in this place is probably long enough for, it's like 10 to 15 minutes, and we don't need to have that. And so standing bars are really popular. I was in London last summer, and I went to this amazing McDonald's that had all sorts of flexible seating, and I walked in and I literally lost my breath and just started videoing. Like, I need to do more of this. This is amazing. So I guess to answer your question, Dan, like, it all just started because I was productive at Starbucks, and I just thought, how can I sort of adapt this model and make it more kid-friendly, but sort of replicate what's happening in these franchises. And it's been working ever since. Like I said, it changes sort of year to year, what happens with it, or what kind of seats we have more of or less of, because the needs of my kids are different every year. But I think that's also a part of being flexible. And I also just want to say that some kids do learn best if they have, like, a table by themselves or a desk by themselves. So I'm not saying, like, you have to get rid of all of the desks in your classroom, because it's really not being a flexible teacher if you are, eliminating a whole type of seating because you think that maybe that's not what's best. So being open, I think, is really good.
Great stuff. And, you know, if you want to continue your your educational career and go into a doctoral program, so I think you could probably write your dissertation about how Starbucks does it, or the tie between Starbucks and flexible seating or something. You've got enough field notes probably already from your data that you collected, but that's really great. I really appreciate you going and talking about how it worked for you, and looking at the patterns and the behaviors of other people too, to kind of guide your thinking of how that could go into the classroom. That's awesome.
Hey,
Thanks.
Kayla, we do have a couple of questions from participants on Twitter. So I'm going to sidestep our questions we have. Brian Claft is a science teacher, and he says that he gives students choice where and who they sit with. Do you have any other suggestions on how to better utilize flexible seating in a lab session, or in a lab seating?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got the same question from a teacher in Nebraska actually on Friday. And so I've seen a few different redesigns of labs. So exactly what he just said is awesome. So what I suggested for the other teacher who was doing a lab seating was just maybe differing the types of seating that you have in the lab. So maybe bringing in some bar stools, or maybe some other types of chairs. Also maybe eliminating some chairs so that the kids can stand or they could sit. We get a quick visitor. It's bedtime. Can you say goodnight? Okay. Sorry about that. You never know what you're going to get, right? Okay, so with lab seating, you might, like I said, switch up the seating, switch up where people stand or sit. Also, you can still consider having an option where maybe it's more where people can maybe sit on more comfortable chairs if you're not doing a lab experiment, and maybe you're doing maybe like some studying or things like that. I'm not sure if that helps or not, but maybe that's what he's looking for. Also, check out the hashtag FlexEd book, because there are lots of people who are offering up options for that too. But I would just suggest exactly what he said, but maybe considering bringing in some different types of chairs, like I said, offering some places where maybe the tables are a little bit higher for people who like to stand and work, which is actually super popular with every group that I've had. And then thinking about sectioning off an area of your classroom where maybe you can just make it more casual, where kids can learn as well.
Great. I'm sure Brian will appreciate that, as well as others. We have one more so far.
Okay.
Krista says, how do you limit the discussion on what furniture should be moved where? Is there a certain time that you should talk about changes in arrangement? So I'm thinking about before you introduce new seating, or maybe when you're first starting to think about flexible seating.
Yeah.
When do you have that conversation?
Yeah, so the beginning of the year, we actually do what's called 10 days of discovery in my classroom. So we actually take 10 days before kids get to start self-selecting seats. So for example, on day one, let's say you choose ball chair, that's where you work for the whole day. And at the end of the day, we talk about pros and cons of your learning that happened in that space. And the next day, maybe they choose standing table for the whole day. The next day, maybe they choose sitting on the floor for the whole day. The next day, coffee table. So basically in my classroom, we have about 10 different options. And so we do the plus minus at the end of every single day. And then they give me their top 3 spaces of where they thought they were most productive. And that's not to just say that that's the only 3 places that they work in our classroom, but those are their 3 go-to places. They also pick just one spot. We call it their smart spot. And that's where they do assessments in our classroom. And so that is that's their go-to spot. But we have that discussion of what do I expect this to look like at this seat at this time, and what do I not expect it to look like? Because I think just as much as we want to model what we want it to look like, it's important to also show them this is what I am expecting it not to look like. And so we do both of those things. And then after 10 days, we sign what's called classroom norms. So I ask the kids, instead of telling them here are our flexible seating rules that I have made, I ask them, so now that you've tried all of the things in our classroom, all the types of seating, what do you need from me in order to make flexible seating successful? And so we just compiled their list of things that they will do, and then they sign them at the bottom. And so that has been a really powerful practice in my classroom, just because it's really turning over that ownership to the kids instead of saying, these are my rules and you're going to follow them. And so when we're going to rearrange the classroom, sometimes we just know it's time for a change. And it's, I wouldn't say, I would say maybe twice a month we do it. We do maybe move it around. Sometimes we really like something and it works for us for over a month. And it's just kind of, you can tell when we're needing to make a change. And so lots of our things are actually on wheels and they're just really easy to move. And so just asking your kids, and maybe if you want to even just choose, like, we're going to evaluate on the third Friday if this is working or if there's anything that we need to change. But my biggest suggestion is just to ask your kids, because most of the time I think it's just perfect or it's great, and they'll be like, this isn't working. And these are third graders, and they can really speak to what's working and not working. So my biggest suggestion is just to ask those kids in your classroom.
That's awesome. We did have another question from Cassidy asking about rules. So thank you for talking about your norms that you have. And
yeah, I also have, sorry. I was going to say, also on my blog, if you click the flexible seating resources, I think I have pictures of the norms posted. If not, I have them all over my social media as well, so that you can kind of see how I do that.
Awesome. I'll find a link to that and share it. But I think it's a nice mindset too, that you're asking the kids, let's have some ownership around these. It's not going to be a don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. We agree to respect these seating arrangements and kind of own that. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
Kayla, you have been selected and recognized as North Dakota Teacher of the Year in 2019.
Yes.
Talk to us about this unique experience.
Like, I still can't wrap my head around it, really. I mean, I hear it and I say it, and it's still just an amazing honor. And so I guess, like, we started out where every school district could have one Teacher of the Year, and then I think it went down to like 52, and then it was down to like 16, and then 8, and then a Final 4. And when it was the Final 4, the state superintendent came to our school for assembly for everybody. And it was really cool to bring all of the kids in and have them see our superintendent there answering questions. And so it was really fun. Good night, babe. And then on the next time, it was, I think, maybe like a few weeks later, she had visited all the schools, and then they announced that I was actually the winner. So we had another assembly, and my parents happened to be flying in from Oregon, and it was just, it's surreal, really cool. And so as North Dakota Teacher of the Year, there's lots of different responsibilities that come with it. Every year, every state is a little bit different how they do it. And so some states, the teacher takes a sabbatical for the whole year. Like, for example, North Carolina, I think it is, Georgia, for sure. She is just taking the year, and she's traveling and speaking. In North Dakota, they keep the teacher in the classroom, but they also have me working on different committees and task force with our governor, with our state superintendent, serving on different committees, and then also just working with different schools in our schools in our state, which has been really good for me to be able to see different things that are happening, not just in Fargo-Moorhead area where I teach, or in Grand Forks, but sort of on the western side of the state as well. And so we went to California, and that was in January, and that was February, and that was just for all of the state teachers of the year to be inducted into the National Teacher of the Year program. And it was held at Google. And so we got to learn about all of the ins and outs of everything education Google. But we also had a whole day on sort of crafting keynotes, crafting speeches with a professional storyteller, which was really cool. And we got to learn a whole day about just policy and why, as Teachers of the Year, that is important, and that we are advocates for our kids and for our teachers in our state. And so for me, that was probably the fire really started burning for me with that, because I've really had to step up and learn more about different bills that are going through, and take a stance on different items or different things, and just become more educated, I think, about that, and in the importance of having that voice for our kids and our teachers that I really needed to do more of as the Teacher of the Year. So it's been a surreal experience. It's really just starting, because it's just coming into April. And so actually my year is a quarter of the year almost done. So that is also kind of crazy already. It's going fast, but it has been a really great experience. We have coming up, our next event is Washington Week, and that's at the end of April, beginning of May. And typically we meet with Secretary DeVos, we meet with President Trump, we get to meet with the vice presidents, we set up meetings with our representatives for our states. And then there's lots of just touring and policy making. And so it's something that I'm really looking forward, and that's sort of what's next up for me with State Teacher of the Year.
What an awesome, unique opportunity. That just sounds really, really cool. Not only to be recognized, but all of those opportunities that are coming along with that. That's really neat. Thanks for sharing, Kayla. So you were one of the 10 authors of the first edition of Education Right Now, a book about current issues that we face in the world of education. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, talk to us about this experience and really what you learned in this process of the summer of 2017.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know about this process, basically what happened is they brought Routledge Publishing Company and Jeff Zoll brought 10 of us we flew into Philadelphia, and we each wrote a chapter on something that was happening in education right now that we were passionate about or that we thought needed to be voiced in education. And so we went there not really knowing what we were going to write about until we got there, until we started with our first roundtable. And so I kind of had ideas about what my chapter was going to be about before, because I had done some crowdsourcing on my social media. What do you see are the biggest things that we need to work on in education right now? Or questions about what I'm doing in my classroom and they want to know more about. And there was tons of responses. And so when I got there, I kind of knew what I wanted to write about. And I actually got to be one of the first people to go around the table. So that was lucky because I got to say, like, I want to write about relationships in education. Can I write about that? And they were like, yep. I'm like, okay, put it down, because I felt pretty good about that. And so that was my chapter was all about relationships in education between parents and teachers and teachers and teachers and administrators and teachers, and most importantly between teachers and students, and practical tips. And so what I actually did, just like I crowdsourced to sort of find out what I wanted to write about, I also crowdsourced ideas from all around the world, teachers who are establishing relationships in all of those ways I talked about, giving tangible ideas, because I know when I read a book, I want like what can I take away from this? What can I do in my classroom tomorrow that I can change or implement? And so I got ideas from all over the world, and I just cited them, and I put in my 2 cents and shouted out a bunch of teachers, which was a really cool experience for me to just uplift other teachers. Is something that I love doing. And so it was stressful for me. It was the first book that I wrote, and it's only 5,000 words, but there's this pressure of, you are writing this chapter in this weekend. And I'm sitting there with these giants, these writing giants who have published lots of books. They have their doctorates. I'm like, I'm a second grade teacher from North Dakota in the classroom. I'm a teacher. Like, I'm just here to write this chapter. And I felt totally underqualified, if I'm being honest. But I'm so proud of the chapter. And I was joking with you three before we started recording, but we would have these sessions where we would get a certain amount of time to write, and then we would get time to write with a partner and bounce ideas off. And then we would write by ourselves and we'd bounce off ideas. And so during these writing times and the meetings, I would get some writing done. But I told them, like, most of my writing happened in my hotel room by myself between like midnight and like 2:30 or 3 in the morning is like when my writing brain was ready to write. And so I think for me, like, speaking, it comes much more naturally, getting up on a stage and speaking. But I think I've also just had way more practice with that. And so this year, there'll be actually 3 different books that my name will be on. And so it's one of those things that I think I'll get just better at as I do more of it. And I'm really excited about the projects that are coming up with writing. So it was a super unique opportunity, and it was sort of the perfect way to just push my limits a little bit and get me writing in a way that I hadn't done before. So it was a great experience, and I'm doing it again, actually. So it was really good.
Perfect. So you can see here's the book, Ed Right Now, Education Right Now. And as Kayla said, just 10 different authors, and each have a chapter of a current issue in the state of education, really. And there's a couple of editions. This was the first edition that Kayla was part of, but check that out. Definitely pretty awesome work from Jeff Zoll and Joe Mazza to kind of head that project up.
Perfect. Well, Kayla, guess shifting gears a little bit, how does technology impact your classroom each day, and what are some of your go-to tools in the classroom with technology?
Great question. So I guess I've been using iPad since like the iPad came out. And so my story with speaking actually sort of starts from there. I was in a really progressive district in Minnesota, and my technology director approached me and said, they have this new thing that's come out, and it's sort of like an iPod or a phone and a computer together, and they're calling it an iPad. And I just want to see if I can give you one, if you think it would be maybe something we could use in schools. They're using some in California right now, and I just want to get you one and see what you think. And I was like, cool, okay. And so I started using just that one iPad in my classroom and doing some things that were progressive at the time, that were a little outside of the box of our traditional education that we had in Minnesota in our classroom. And the next end of this, so that was in the fall, and then in the spring he said, so Kayla, next year I would love to pilot 6 iPads in your classroom. And I was like, what? That's amazing. 6 iPads. Like, okay, I would love it. Like, what do I need to do? And he's like, well, you need to speak to teachers in our district, and you need to give PD for them about how to implement iPads in their classroom. And I was like, nope, I'm out. I don't speak to teachers. That's not my bag. Like, I can't do it. I don't know how to speak to teachers. That's scary. Like, I can't do it. That spring, he brought me 6 iPads, perfectly new, charged in cases, like the beautiful charging case, ready to go. And I was like, okay, now that I see them, I realize I'm just going to have to do this. So I started speaking in my district, and then I started speaking in like state conferences in Minneapolis. And then it has just turned into lots more that I do with speaking specifically about technology, still years later about technology. So we do a lot. Our district actually has Chromebooks now for 6th grade. But the rest of our school, pre-K through 5th grade, we have iPads. And so my classroom is a 1-to-1 classroom. I would say we do about half on iPads and half still with traditional, well, I shouldn't say traditional, but optional if they want to use traditional like paper pencil, or if they want to type something. But some of our favorite apps for sure are Seesaw. I love Seesaw app because my students, it's basically a digital portfolio where they can upload their work, they can upload pictures, they can upload videos, they can annotate, they can draw right on it. And it goes, they can record their voices, which they love because these kids are already vlogging and blogging and having YouTube channels. So their videos are actually awesome, let me just say. And so I approve their work, and then parents get a notification that there's work in their child's Seesaw journal. And parents are liking and commenting right away, which is super motivating for my students. And so Seesaw is one that's a game changer for me. My students also love anything with Google Classroom. So even just like Google Slides, Google, let me think, they use a lot with Google Slides. Anything that I can upload in Google Classroom that they can edit, that they can create, they love that. They love Epic Books for Kids, which is basically Netflix for books, which is awesome, not only for my students at school, but my own kiddos at home. Love the options that they have on Epic that just didn't exist when I first started using iPads. I would have to pay $5 for like a book on an iPad, and it wasn't even a good book. It was like the cat sat on the mat, right? So like now we're reading Scaredy Squirrel, or we're reading National Geographic partners with Epic. So that is definitely a favorite too. So I mean, I have tons of favorites, and my students have tons of favorites as well. One website that we really like, especially this time of year, is a website that's just called explore.org, where students can actually watch tons of different options for webcams. And they're like live webcams that are out. Like there's one out in the Arctic and they can watch live polar bears. Or in the fall, there's one where you can watch fall leaves or dogs. Like there's tons. And in the spring in Minnesota and North Dakota, we're all held captive by what's called the eagle cam in Minnesota. We all wait for the eagles to hatch. And so explore.org has sort of been like a nice branch off point for that as well. So I have way more ideas on my blog, topdogteaching.com for sure. I also have I believe I have a list on my blog as well. If not, I can for sure tweet it out, that has just favorites that we use in our classroom that we really like. And even more just ideas for classrooms K through 12, actually classrooms K through university with technology. So I'm happy to share that out as well.
Awesome. So I am just sending a tweet out now that kind of captures what you had just said for some of your favorites, but I'm sure if anybody has a specific thing that they want to ask you about, you'll be more than happy to
absolutely
if they want to ask you a question.
Yes, for sure.
Krista and Cassidy would like to know, are there certain academic benefits to flexible seating? Does it help them focus better because they can choose what works for them? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, 100% yes. So in the book, like I said, there's a section that's just the research. And so when I first started, like I said, my research was literally Starbucks research. And now like there's dissertations and doctorates and all sorts of research. A lot of it is actually coming out of Finland, where their kids have been doing free choice sitting forever. And so yes, lots of benefits. So increased motivation, increased engagement. There's also tons of physical activity links to higher academic performance. And so I can attest to that year after year where, I mean, I could go on a whole soapbox about how I feel about test scores and how they don't actually, a test score does not define a student, and a test score does certainly not define a teacher or a school. And I think like we need to really think about, this is something I've been working a lot with as teacher of the year actually, about how can we better assess schools and teachers in ways that doesn't depend 88% or 67%, depending on your state, on a single test score. And so that's something I I get really fired up about actually. But I think, yeah, so it has tons of physical activity, tons of links to higher academic performance, whether it's increased test scores, increased motivation, decreased distracting behaviors. Like I can tell you, I haven't had to work with a principal for a negative behavior for 5 years. The only time that kids go to a principal is because there's something awesome that they need to show them. And so tons of benefits. All of them are linked. If you want like an extensive list, go to the blog, topdogteaching.com, and go to flexible seating resources. But for sure, kids are more focused. They're able to learn where they really do learn best, in the environment that's best for them. And so tons of different benefits, but those are some of the main ones for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of those. I'll try and get some of those links out here to our hashtag.
Okay.
You've also spoken about putting students at the center as leaders. How have you successfully been able to do this?
Okay, so lots of different ways I'm passionate about. For sure, kids are the center of our classroom, where they control lots of different things. They have classroom leadership roles where they actually apply for classroom jobs. And so we have way more jobs than we have kids. So some kids actually apply for 2 jobs if they think they can do 2 things at the same week. But they fill out a job application of what job it is that they like to apply for, why they think that they would be a good leader in that position, and what I could expect from them. And then they get hired on Mondays for different jobs. And so that's one way. Choosing where they sit is one way. Choosing what they learn is another way. So I've been collaborating a ton with our classroom, or with our school's media specialist this year. Her name is Corrine Freeman. She's a superstar. On Twitter, she's at LibraryStar26. And my Genius Hour projects have been phenomenal this year because of her. Your school media specialist or librarian is like a hidden gem in your school, and they want to collaborate with teachers. And so she's great about coming to classrooms and saying like, what are you working on this year? How can I help you? And so we've been working on a year-long project now where we actually meet every Monday at 10:30. We go through their Genius Hour project proposals, and we see where they're at, if they're still in the research stage, if they're in the we need to practice stage, they're building a presentation stage, or if they're finished with all that and they're picking a new topic. So we go through all of them. If they need to work with teachers, if they need to work with a partner, do they need somebody to be an audience for them? And we plan, and that in itself has just had our hands all over it and made it 2 sets of teacher eyes. She also has access to all of these like secret resources that I didn't know as a classroom teacher, because she's like a library ninja. So she's got like all of these other national libraries and resources. That's amazing. And so she's been great to work with. And then twice a week, my kids actually get their Genius Hour time for half hour each time. And so if it's a week where we have a heavy amount of kids who are getting close to ready to present, I'll actually go to library with them on Wednesdays, and we'll just tag team library time where they can do research as well. But we have found the coolest projects and presentations from these Genius Hour projects. And actually, there are just so many standards that are covered with Genius Hour. So it's not an add-on. It's not like something extra that you can do in your classroom. So so many speaking and listening standards, so many reading and writing standards. A huge one that I have found to be very helpful in 3rd grade this year is being able to synthesize. So taking credible information from a primary source and credible information from a different primary source and seeing how they are similar and putting them together, that synthesizing piece. And also just in a world where fake news is even tricking the news, like teaching 3rd graders how to identify primary sources and secondary sources and see if something might be fake news or credible news, that's a whole nother ballgame that we're doing this year. But Genius Hour is another way that my kids have been really leading in my classroom. And then I'll just mention a 4th one that I've been doing for a few years now. And every single year, it just revitalizes me and the students and the families. But twice a year, we have parent-teacher conferences. And instead of having traditional conferences, I actually have student-led conferences. And I've been doing it in 2nd grade. I've been doing it in 3rd grade. And so the kids, basically, they have like a portfolio that they go through. They share their data, they share goals, things that they need to improve on. They also share celebrations, things that they have improved on, things that are going really well in school. And we talk about what we like about school, what we need to improve about school. The cool thing is the student actually leads the conference. So they sit where the teacher typically would sit on the opposite side of the table. And I sit shoulder to shoulder with the parents. And the student leads this conference. And I think what's really cool about that is the student knows that we all are hearing the same message about that kid, and that we're all on that child's team, right? And there's no like secret agenda or secret messages being shared between the parents and I that they don't know about. And I can say, as a teacher's kid and a major rule follower growing up, like even though I knew I was like a good student, I was following all the rules. I wasn't getting sent to the office, the principal's office, except for one time by my mom in kindergarten. Like I knew I was doing the right things, but when my parents would go to parent-teacher conferences, I was always panicking. Like, what are they going to say about me? What did I do wrong? And so for me, it just eliminates that anxiety piece because we're all there and we're all hearing it. And so that has proven to be really a powerful practice in my classroom because we all hear the same messages. Teachers leave, I leave the conference feeling like, whoa, that went so well. The parents are super proud of their child. The child is like so excited because everybody got to hear how awesome that they are and how supportive we all are of them. And it really just creates sort of like this family environment that we are all gathering around and helping this one child. So that's just another way that we do a lot of student leadership in our classroom as well.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Great ideas to build that student voice and that student ownership for sure. Kayla, we're getting close to the end here, but we've got a bigger scale question here. So if you could change one thing in the landscape of education, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Just one?
We'll limit you to just one because we do want to get you out of here before it's too late. So we'll keep it to one.
I think one thing I think that is really actually something that can be changed is just allowing more training for teachers when it comes to social emotional learning. I think kids are coming to school with backpacks full of lots of different needs that maybe they didn't have even when I first started teaching. And so we know anxiety rates are up, depression rates are up, suicide rates are up. kids are coming to us very stressed and with more sort of on their hearts and on their carrying all this baggage that they didn't have before. And as teachers, it's almost like, since we're teachers, we're just assumed that we are also knowing how to be psychologists and counselors and doctors and judges, and we just don't have that training. We don't have enough training to be handling all of these things. And so one thing I would really like to see more of is training specifically for teachers, not just how to help students, but also many teachers are experiencing the same feelings. And so getting help for teachers too, because we know that teachers are leaving education faster than ever. I hope that I'm going to say this right number, but I think it's like 280,000 teachers left education last year, which is just insane. Many of them within the first 5 years of their career. And we're not filling those spots because we don't have enough college freshmen who are choosing education anymore. I think the number is below 3% of incoming freshmen now. And so teacher well-being is also something that really needs to be, I think, looked at, because we can't help these kids if we can't help ourselves. And so I think that is something I preach about relationships first and everything else second. And I think in order to really truly do that, we need to be equipping our teachers and in ways to be able to help kids, but also in ways to be able to help ourselves. So that is one thing that I think is really practical to do for me, especially in this next year.
Great, thank you, Kayla. Appreciate your thoughts there. Yeah, big landscape that we can influence some change in, but that would be a great way to start. So thank you for your thoughts there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So our last question for you here is, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, but what's next? What's on the horizon for you, Kayla?
Only God knows, really. I think, like, if I could go back to when I first pitched that TED Talk idea, I was just doing it because I wanted to do the next scary thing, to try something that was scary. And since then, it's just been lots of different things that have happened. But FlexEd will be coming out this year, along with 2 other different collaborative books. Some more keynotes that I'm really excited about. I have they're all listed on my website, so you can see where confirmed contracts are coming in 2019, so you can see where I'm coming next. I just keynoted the NEDA conference in Nebraska this last week. I've got another conference, several conferences, but another one that is pretty popular this summer is the SDE Nationals Conference. I'll be keynoting in Las Vegas this summer in the middle of July. I've got quite a few events in Texas, which I just love going back to Texas. So I think just more speaking, finishing up my tour as Teacher of the Year, and speaking on my platforms in that way. The books that are coming out, and ironically, I'm getting married in less than 2 weeks. So that's kind of, that's going to be a big change in 2019. So the 2 kiddos that you saw coming running down, those are the kids of my fiance. And so I will officially become their bonus mom on April 12th. And so coming up really soon. So I think this whole nother aspect of my life of becoming a mom, becoming a parent, and what that looks like. And kind of that's been a learning curve for me, full of lots of grace, because parenting is really just not the same as teaching, I'm learning. So I think it has made me a better teacher in a lot of ways. But that is just a whole nother, on the personal side, something that's coming up this year for me really soon, which my face literally hurts from smiling. We are so excited, and it's getting really close. So there's that.
Well, from all of us here at IAedChat, we definitely say congratulations for that new chapter in your life. I'm going to go ahead and just share a couple resources, and then we're going to have you close up with a quick message for your viewers. If you have not yet, please find Kayla on Twitter at TopDogTeaching. That is Kayla's account. And then she also has a student account at TopDogKids. Yep. You can find her website, www.topdogteaching.com. Also follow the hashtag FlexEdBook. She has a TEDx talk that I shared, Reimagining Classrooms, Students as Leaders and Teachers as Leaders. And then her book that came out, The Education Right Now, that we talked about earlier in 2017, and then coming soon, FlexEd, Flexible Seating for Flexible Learners. So Kayla, I'm going to give you a minute or two to just give us some closing thoughts for our viewers tonight on IAedChat.
Perfect. So I think maybe I'll just close with just two things. One is best practice starts now. So if there's anything that you heard me talking about tonight that sort of is on your heart and it's maybe something that you want to do in your classroom, I'm going to encourage you to just go ahead and start with it. I think far too often as educators, we are always waiting for the next break, right? Spring break or Christmas break or the next school year to try to start something with our kids, where really, like, we can just dive in. We can start on Monday or Tuesday with different apps or different seating or different parent communication tools, whatever social emotional learning curriculum, whatever it is that you want. You don't need to wait until the new school year to start something. Like, if it's best practice, we owe it to our students to be starting with it right away, starting at the very, like, right tomorrow. And so I'm going to really encourage you to just, like, I hope that something I said not only inspired you, but actually had like this call to action where you want to go do something in your classroom. And then just really to summarize, that best practice starts now. And if it's right for kids, it's right. And so just really assessing, thinking about in your classroom, like, is this what is best for kids? Is this what is right for kids? And just opening it up to your kids. What do you need? How can I help you? What would you change? And just sort of thinking about, even in our schools or in our districts, the decisions that we're making, are they kid-based, right? Or are they adult-based? And just sort of keeping our true compass north of, if it's right for kids, it's right.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla, for your closing message there. And for our viewers here, going to wrap up with some logistical upcoming events that we've got going on in Iowa and around our area. So coming up this Wednesday, the Iowa One-to-One Institute, that's happening on Wednesday, April 3rd in Des Moines. The leadership day for that event is the day before, April 2nd, and AJ Giuliani will be the special guest for that. So check out iowa1to1.com for more info. And there's a certain trio of presenters that you might want to check out at 11:30, maybe on Wednesday, April 3rd. So Andrea, Nick, and I will be delivering a session, Making Virtual Connections in Your PJs. So check us out. We're going to talk about all things Iowa EdChat. We're going to talk about just some digital learning platforms and things that really drive us. So check us out. That'll be Wednesday, April 3rd. Iowa ASCD will host Jenny Donahue with learning focused around collective efficacy. That's coming up April 11th and 12th. You can check out tinyurl.com/ASCD 2019 to register. Jenny's amazing. You might want to check that out if you are available. And then looking ahead to October, John Hattie and Peter DeWitt are coming to Cedar Rapids on October 16th, 2019. Visit gwaea.org for more info and details on that. So wrapping up here, everybody, thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts on Iowa EdChat Live. Always the last Sunday of every month. And we've got a great lineup these next few months, as we've had in 2019 here. And we're really excited about the guests that we're welcoming on. So it is great learning with all of you. And a very special thank you to our guest tonight, Kayla Delzer. And be sure to follow some of your new friends that you met tonight and visit our hashtag throughout the week, hashtag IAedChat, to continue the conversation. And check out our resources. We've got a ton on our website, tinyurl.com/IAedChat. Guys, we're going to be back next week with another great topic. And until that time, be the change.